All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our meetup, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. Perhaps some of you are joining us from Vancouver, so big shout out to our folks in Vancouver and London as well. And as many of you may know, our today's talk is special because our very own Chris is presenting, and he's part of the leadership team at not just UXD Chicago, but several of our meetups. And his last talk was one of the most watched and sought after talks in the history of our meetups. So I'm sure, like you all are, just like I am, we are all excited for the presentation today. Chris is the director of product insights and design at Kazoo. I can personally attest that he's one of the most driven and strategic thinker that I've ever met. So really, he's the best person to talk about enterprise design, which is the topic of today's discussion. And today he's going to show you how to piece together different elements of design to provide a holistic user experience. And I'm sure he'll be sharing more details about the agenda today as well. One quick note, if you have any questions during the talk, feel free to type them in the chat box, and Chris will pick them up after his presentation is over. So with that being said, let's welcome Chris. Chris, take it away.
Thank you so much, Rishi. Really appreciate everybody joining. If your lives are anything like my own, you sit on Zoom calls all day long. So I really appreciate everybody coming out for one more at the end of the day here. A little bit more about myself. As Rishi mentioned, I am Director of Product Insights and Design at Kazoo. That means I'm player coach on Kazoo's product design team, and I'm also product manager for insights, integrations, and mobile work at Kazoo. I've got a long history of software design across diverse industries, and I'm an organizer for this group. I've included a picture here of the dudes. These are my boys, Resner, Miles, and Herbie. Spend a lot of time hanging and doing stuff with them. And beyond just me as like a day-to-day guy, I work at a company called Kazoo. I wanted to talk just for a second about what we do at Kazoo. And we believe that every company, regardless of size or industry, should strive to create a workplace where all employees can thrive. And we do that by helping companies better understand and continually improve every moment of the employee experience. We do everything from onboarding to offboarding and everything between. Our employee experience platform brings everything that you need to do that into one place. We have kind of three pillars that make up the platform: recognition and rewards, which is helping companies, celebrate all their wins, providing really positive feedback amongst the team. We've got a performance management module, so that's things like setting goals in OKRs, giving and receiving feedback, doing performance reviews and evaluations. And then we've got employee surveys, which is employee listening. And what that allows us to do is in one comprehensive place, really understand how employees are engaging with their company and help companies understand their teams and how they can build better workplaces for them. And I've been working at Kazoo now for 3 years, and it's really been a foundational shift for me for how I think about design. I'm not doing design anymore to improve, a hedge fund's fintech website or an ad tech company's placements. I'm trying to improve the employee experience, which has had a big change on my design thinking and philosophy over the last couple of years, and led to, what I want to present on today, which is what is enterprise design. And it's really hard to define. It can mean a lot of things. Is it about serving a particular customer size because you're serving mid-market versus a really large business? Serving those large companies or Fortune 500 companies, does that make you enterprise? So like Apple's now our customer, now I'm an enterprise designer. Or is it about how turnkey your product is? Does it require an expertise to set up and configure, or is it off the shelf ready for your customers to use? Um, is it the size of your design team? I've met people, that have 120 person design teams. I have a 3-person design team reporting into me. Is it a style of work? Is it a process? It could be any number of these things. But my real philosophy on design is that design and research sit in the heart of any organization. And we've got the ability to impact and add value to everything that we do. And it's not about what you're doing as much as it is about who are you doing it with. Working with the key stakeholders across any of these different departments, you can really add lots of value with your design work. I think it's really blatantly obvious how that impacts your customers, right? But having great design workflows can impact your customer success team. Less support calls needed, less bugs. Your marketing and sales is easier if your product design looks great. Your product management team, like you can lead product management with great design. You can lead engineering with great design. In my line of work, we are improving the lives of HR people. So like you have this ability to do everything. And for the context of today's conversation, enterprise design is bringing together all the elements needed to successfully or make your company successfully deliver experiences using a holistic and systemic design approach. And what I'm hoping to do today is share some of my process, tools, philosophy, and lessons that I've learned so you can take these ideas back to your org and make them yours. And the key word here for me is experiences. As designers, we aren't just delivering, a nice mock-up at the end of the day, but process, workflows, and those items that do add value to all parts of your organization. And I'm not going to go incredibly deep on any particular topic, but I hope that you leave with a couple questions that you can ask yourself or your team and take a few ideas back to implement. So what we're going to go over today is we're going to talk about crafting your design process. We're going to look at building a deep design system, creating your design team philosophy, and then measuring success in design work. So crafting your process. I think all of us at this point have probably seen this, the atomic design structure. There's also agile and waterfall. We've got the design sprint methodology, design thinking methodologies, and there's a good chance that you are using one or a hybrid of any of these approaches within your work. My question I want to pose is, do you actually know what you're doing in your organization? Are you doing it consistently? And how are the decisions made to take these things through their steps? Who's in control at the different phases? So within our process, we have so many potential tasks we can do: research methodologies, validation procedures, and techniques that we can use. And you could be on a small team where you're responsible for many of these things, or you could be part of a really big team where, research and interface design are completely separate disciplines. And this is really different in every organization. There's different team and reporting structures, different processes, different customers, different platforms. Sometimes you need a process that works well across your entire company. And sometimes you need a process that's right for a particular team or an individual. And a well-versed UX team knows how to bring together best practices from across those different methodologies and really synthesize them into actionable items that can help improve your platform. And blending these different techniques will help provide the correct insights and clarity of the problems that your customers and team are facing. So, what do? We want to know what that right process is from your particular team. What's the depth and how do you come in and out of that? And what do you own? And the question I'm going to pose to all of you is that you need to know thyself. My last presentation that I gave to this group was really 100% just about this. And what we did was at Kazoo, we have this process that we follow. It had steps, it had a checklist associated with it. And the checklist was detailed, but it didn't correctly layer the interdependencies of the other teams, stakeholders, and our customers into the process. So what I started with was started looking at this of who's the primary and secondary players in each phase of this flow. And my goal was to understand how the designers engage with the different team members throughout the entire process. This is the 10,000 foot view of it, but I wanted to capture really explicit details. So what I did is I integrated the user research, product design, and user testing steps into our product process. And at this point, we're moving from what our existing process was to a layered approach of not where we necessarily are right now, but where we want it to be. And I did this across every phase of that workflow: strategy, research, refinement, execution, and launch. So here, what I've done is I've kind of taken our flow of like, hey, we can look at the pain points and open questions and wireframing and high resolution design, and how do all these different pieces fit in within this research structure, and who is participating at each phase. So what I did to do this is I set up a journey map, and that journey map had this entire process mapped end to end through all those phases. And I included all the key stakeholders that I needed to interview within the process. Part of what I needed to do was understand the best order to interview those people and refine the work based on their feedback. So what I did was I started and ended with our product team, and I reviewed everybody else in between. As part of this journey mapping process, I really recommend a few things that you get in and you have really one-on-one interviews with individual team members. And when you're going through that research, it's about reviewing that process. What steps did we create? What did we miss? What's in the wrong order? What are we considering? How did different teams react to that same flow? And I captured a lot of physical notes. I recorded all the sessions, and I reviewed all those pain points and opened them up with those stakeholders as they came up. And what we're going to see is that it starts to get really busy, and you start to capture lots of details. So this is an early iteration view of what our launch workflow looked like. And here you can see the collections of notes, questions, and individual responses within each section of this journey map. And what I was trying to do was really capture that feedback I was getting side by side along with the journey map. That way, all my information is in one place. And the tool I use to do this is Whimsical, in case you're curious. And what I have here is all my edits, all my notes, and the journey map side by side, where I can see everything at once. And I was able to get to some synthesis within this flows. This is a methodology I used throughout the process, and whenever a certain step in my flow had many differing opinions, it was highlighted in red. And I was always able to then discuss that with all the stakeholders. And this allowed me to collect a large range of varying viewpoints on some of the hardest topics we had to cover. And then as the conversations and the interviews progressed, I was typically able to get consensus on these most troubling workflows and these most troubling spots within the journey map, because I was able to address it explicitly with everybody. So taking these things that are pain points, mapping them to action items and steps, and iterating and repeating that with everybody throughout the flows. And what that allowed me to do was to create a really comprehensive journey map that takes our team through that entire software development process. And I'm not going to review our process today and take up the rest of the presentation, but I've included here some QR codes. So if you want to grab a snap of that real quick, you can review that journey map that we created at Kazoo. And there's also a link here to the presentation, the really in-depth presentation I gave on this last year. But what you're trying to get to with this is, you need to understand how that software gets made within your organization. And you need to understand how you as a designer interact with all your teams throughout the process. And with that understanding, you get to really important things. So if you know your process, you can improve your process. You can advocate for it. You can talk about the benefits and the outcomes that you get with this process. And you can show how this impacts what's happening within your individual teams. You can show how this is impacting your customers. And then if something goes wrong, you can blame the process. You don't have to blame a person. The process can always be adjusted. The process can have steps that you go in depth. The process can have steps that you skip. But what you've done is you've really documented how things flow within your org. And this had some pretty big impacts at Kazoo. This is a quote from my SVP of product. And, the real highlight I want to throw out here is that the process work has resulted in a focus on increased time for research, refinement, and planning, leading to better project execution. Like, what better outcome than that you could hope for is getting more time to do research on your designs and refine your designs. Like, this is the best outcome I could have possibly hoped for. And it turned out to not only create more time for research in our org, but then that research turns into a better product and a better customer experience. So, take the time to do the service design work and really understand how you build software and how you can improve that process of building software. The next thing I want to talk about is, building a deep design system. I know many people have a design system, but the questions I want to pose are do you like it? Is it done? Does it meet all of your needs? And are you aligned in your organization on how it's used? So you may have standardized your patterns. You could have created a component library, but what I'm going to ask is what's next? And how tightly coupled are the tools that you use as a design team with what your engineering team has delivered? And how much detail does your design system really deliver? So, I've got some other questions here. What level of atomic design flow does it represent? What other supplementary information can you include? And how are you able to go out and advocate for the use of your design system? Most design systems are really just pattern libraries. It's like a big box of UI Lego pieces that can be assembled in near infinite ways. And, but that doesn't mean that the end result of what you're building is going to be great, as I'm kind of illustrating here. We used all Lego blocks to build this spaceship, but this spaceship is a mess. And a mistake I see a lot of teams make is they stop at the atomic or the molecular level of atomic design system. And you don't continue to deliver standards and structure into the organism and template and page level. And what I'm going to advocate for is that your documentation needs to extend throughout that entire hierarchy. And you need to bring in detail and instruction at the same place with the rest of your documentation. I'm going to read this quote. This is from Ted Stevens, an Alaskan senator from 2006. If you're as old as I am, it's might have some relevance. You might have heard this before. But he was talking about the internet in front of the Senate, and they want to deliver vast amounts of information over the internet. And again, the internet is not something that you just dump something on. It's not a big truck. It's a series of tubes. And if you don't understand those tubes, they can be filled, and if they are filled, when you put your message in, it gets in line, and it's going to be delayed by anyone that puts it into the tube. Enormous amounts of material. And this quote is ridiculous, but there is a truth in it, which is that within all the tools that we design on the internet, there is a person or a system inputting information into one end of the tube. And out of the other end of the tube, we want to see a result. All software has it. Somebody's putting something in, somebody's getting something out. And the other thing I want to advocate really strongly for as we talk about deep design systems is that you need to have a exceptionally consistent user experience for human entered data into your system. And I am a crazy person about form design and form layout. I think rigorous attention to detail and form design is the most important thing you can document to create consistency for your application. Really setting super detailed standards at the organism and template level for what is acceptable and what is not acceptable in form design. And the last thing I'm going to say is that you really want to limit the types of inputs you create. The more you deviate from these standards, the harder things become to maintain. I was talking to head of design for Cvent, the event planning app. He has 120 designers, and he said to me, Chris, I know you're probably going to hate this, but we have 5 date pickers in our app. And I'm like, yes, I do hate that. And the way he referred to it is that, it is the, survival of the fittest. Eventually, one of those 5 date pickers is going to win, and the other ones are going to slide off. And that's a completely different way of thinking about things than I had previously, because as somebody managing a 3-person design team, I want everybody really aligned. We don't have the luxury of having that flexibility and the Lord of Flies style. This is the style that's going to win. But I can definitely see that happening at bigger orgs where you have to move fast, and it's really hard to keep that big team and have that continuity. But there's always some flexibility within any of these things I'm saying. The next thing I want to advocate for within your design system is making sure you've got a full stack design system. The shared conceptual model of your product. Can everybody on your team walk up to a whiteboard and explain how your product works at a system level? Like, what are the main objects and how do they interact? What's the shared language? I want everybody to remember that words matter. And if designers, engineers, and support people are all using the same word to describe the same thing, so much organizational fogginess goes away. And the other thing you need is those shared design resources to quickly create mockups that accurately reflect our design system. So does your design system have components or symbols for each object? Does it have the right variations? And do your different libraries support web and native mobile? Like, do you have all that built in? And the last piece of this is really that shared code component library that allows engineers to build these components and their variations quickly, often with like a single line of code. And my goal for any of you would be that there's a one-to-one mapping with those objects that you've got in your Sketch or your Figma or your Adobe XD with those objects that you've got in your code base, so that you've created that consistency within your org between how a designer thinks about things to how an engineer thinks about things, and that software that your end users are ultimately using in the platform. And with any of this, it's about documentation, linking, and sharing and sharing and sharing what you've created within your organization. So here's just some content ideas for design systems. A good design system is never done. And you want to incorporate the details and depth that you need to drive clarity in your organization. But you could put any of these items into your design system to give it that depth. Once again, I'm linking to Kazoo's design system. It's not perfect. It's a work in flight, but it's what we have, and it has really helped us drive consistency and explain things in our organization. All right, next topic. Let's talk about creating a design team philosophy. So thinking about this, how does we've talked about that process of how you work within other areas of your organization, that journey map of your design process. We've talked about building that deep design system, but how does your team act together as a design team? Another quote I love, Roy H. Williams, an advertising wizard and author: the first step in exceeding your customers' expectations is to know those expectations. And what that comes down to is research. You have to do research to be an enterprise design team. You can't guess. You can't have conjecture entering your workflows. And you need to understand how that research is being done across your org. You might be doing research as a user experience team or as a product designer, but do you know that research is being done by your sales team, by your marketing team, by your customer success team? And how are you breaking down those silos of information within your organization to help you understand your customers and make good design decisions? And you need to also make sure that that you have a place that your team has a way to share what they've learned with your organization. So as far as research goes, our key principles is that we solve problems for our users by understanding those users and their problems. We conduct research, build personas, flowcharts, and diagrams, and then we share this knowledge with our team, and we use this understanding to make decisions within our organization. I will never give a presentation that does not have this quote in it. This is my favorite design quote of all time. It's by Edward Tufte. He's written some of my favorite design books. I'd really encourage you all to check out these books. The Visual Display of Quantitative Information and Envisioning Information are crucial books if you're looking at displaying any sort of data to users. But design isn't crafting a beautiful textured button with breathtaking animation. It's figuring out if there's a way to get rid of the button altogether. And what this leads me to is my next important principle for enterprise design, which is MVP first. I don't know about you, but when I am working on a project, I have tons of ideas while I'm designing things. So many ideas, really big ideas, great ideas, incredibly expensive ideas. And what I would do is encourage all of you to work with your product managers and your partners to understand, what does a minimal viable product mean at your organization? And then I'd encourage you to be ruthless about it. And MVP does not mean bad user experience. It means what is a great, simple user experience. Because every feature that you end up creating ends up creating a cascade of effects on the product. Engineers need to build it. Quality assurance needs to test it. And it's much easier to add something into your product than to take something away once it's in users' hands. Something that we've done at Kazoo is what we will actually, within Figma, we will break our product out into, hey, this is the MVP view of this feature that we're adding. And then from that MVP view, I'd say, hey, but if we added this value add feature next, this is how it changes the design. And then if we add this feature next, this is the next thing. And then what we're doing is we're able to work with our PM partners and our engineer partners to say, this is the priority of features we want to add. This is the minimum thing we can build that's going to add value for the customer. And here are the additional value add items that we can add in, and setting our designs up in a way where it's really easy for those other parties to consume that information and understand how these value add things layer into your process. The other thing that we're trying to do more of at Kazoo as well is to put our research and our UX elements in the context of design. Figma's really helped us change how we operate at scale. Everybody democratizing design, everybody having access to the most updated designs at all times. But what we're trying to do now is put in that contextual information next to the designs. So research, workflows, personas, side by side with the Figma designs. And we're still working on refining this format at Kazoo, but I've seen a huge input packed just putting the journey maps on top of the designs and flagging which step of the journey map I'm in, or which persona is using the design at a particular phase, or including those tidbits that you get with the research or a quote from a conversation right next to a design. When you're then talking through that design, presenting it to the engineering team, you've got those details right there in the context that are ready to share with those parties that you are working on building this out with. Next thing is design elements. Really understanding what is that process and ownership model for adding new things into your library. We've got a few rules at Kazoo. First one is designing first with what exists in the library. Let's start with not adding in new elements. And then if a problem can't be solved within the library, then explore adding additional UI and features. And then having that process within your team to be able to, update and publish those things. And not only that process within your design team, but then how do you roll those changes out to production, right? What's your partnership with engineering look like if you want to go in and update, a button animation or how a dropdown works? How are you getting that into production? How are you managing that workflow so that rolls out across your entire platform? So you really need to have that process in place. And the great thing about the design library is that it is a living document and you can update and change it, but you always need to have that path forward so that your product doesn't end up with too many disparate solutions in it. If one designer on your team decides that they want to change the button format, and they start building that within a module or a project, now you have a disparity within your design where one page looks different than another. And that drift will slowly, it might start small, but if you don't get a handle on it, you aren't going to have a really tightly coupled clean UI at the end of the day. So within our design library, we've got some important rules. We use atomic design. We use path to completion for forms, and we design for the WCAG 2.1 AA accessibility standards. So this is back to that deep design system. It has to be part of your philosophy too, and whatever decisions you make as a team need to be captured and detailed and outlined. Next piece, the last few things I've mentioned, like research, MVP design, design elements, design library, that allowed me to set up a structure at Kazoo where we have some guardrails in place for how the design team should be operating. But outside of these initial concepts, my goal is really to get out of the way and let the team work. I want to be the team's cheerleader and support system, help them critique, problem solve, and break down walls. So, get the guardrails in place, but then get out of the way and empower your team to make decisions and help them understand the history and context of past decision making. And then, help them move things forward. Next piece is design decisions. In a perfect world, you've done your research, you've validated your designs, and your team members across every department are fully aligned on the software that you're going to build. But we all know that doesn't always happen. And so what I'm also advocating for is that you need to make sure you have a methodology in place for making decisions about what's an acceptable product to build, but also what's an acceptable product to ship, right? So we've talked about things being research backed, but at Kazoo, the project's product manager has final say on feature scope. I, as design director, have final say on UI to deliver that scope. 99% of the time, I'm going to leave that decision up to my designer as well, but I want to make sure I've got a methodology to step in if something is not going right. And the last thing is that we want to remove emotion and ego from our conversations as much as possible and come together as a team to make that final decision. All right, designers are mediators. This is also super important to me. I'm gonna be blunt. I'm not interested in employing the asshole genius on my team. That doesn't mean that we as designers need to be doormats, but with so many stakeholders, customers, and team members, my expectation for my team is that we are the problem solvers in the organization and not the problem creators. So designers are mediators at Kazoo. We have empathy, we listen, we iterate. Another important point is that our designers need to be open to exploring solutions that they may not agree with. That doesn't mean that they have to back that decision, but they need to be open to exploring it and seeing where it leads, because you don't know what you're going to learn by exploring that initial solution. It might lead to that right solution by exploring the wrong one for a little bit, or taking in that product manager's feedback or that customer success person's feedback and applying it to the work. See what happens. At the end of the day, we're trying to find a path to bring everybody together with our work. And we're going to use research and logic to defend our decisions, not emotion and ego, once again. And also, we are a team. We may be spread out across different product vertices, personas, working with different Scrum teams and product managers, but the design team is still one team. And once you've got that philosophy and operating agreement that you've created with your team, and you need to share that with your team. It needs to be part of your onboarding process. You need to share it with your product partners and your engineering partners and say, like, this is how we work as designers. This is what it means to be our design team. And we work together to solve problems. User needs come first. We treat each other with respect. We hold each other accountable, and everybody on the team has a voice. So the last thing I want to address is measuring success in design. So another great quote, 60% of customers are willing to pay more for a better experience. And the most important measurement you can make is tying spend to UX to an ROI at your company, right? Like, you think about what a bank does. Every bank does the same thing. You've got your checking account, your savings account, but what's going to lead you to use one bank over another is going to be that user experience of that banking platform, is going to be how you feel when you go into that banking office. Do they treat you with respect? Are they kind to you? Does their software work the way you want it to? When everybody is providing the same service, it's the user experience that's going to win out at the end of the day and drive customers and acquisition. So there's a really interesting study I'd encourage you to look at, which is the McKinsey Design Index study. And basically, they tracked the design practice at over 300 publicly traded companies. And the outcome of this was that there was not only a high correlation between a high MDI score and business performance, but these results were consistent across multiple industries, which include medical technology, consumer goods, retail banking. And the 4 ways that they valued design for the study was analytical leadership, cross-functional talent, continuous iteration, and user experience. And this is really about breaking down those internal walls between physical, digital, and service design within companies. And the outcomes really speak for themselves. Companies that invest more in user experience increase their revenue more than companies that do not invest in user experience. And 17% of all respondents here said their largest design weakness is not employing design metrics as part of the analytical leadership of their company. That's measuring success in design. If you don't measure things, you don't have anything to bring to the table in those discussions with executives, stakeholders, and leaders. You need to have the proof to back up what you're doing. Something else that gets at this, if you think a good design is expensive, look at the cost of bad design. If you can't prove the metrics on why adding more UX is going to be good for your org, look at what the bad UX is costing your org. The financial burdens of a poor user experience are both incremental and cumulative. Over the long haul, it costs more money if a company is going to underfund or ignore user experience, because these technical and user experience debts build up and they become a real financial debt at each stage of the development lifecycle. My experience is that when developing software, typically the most constrained and costly resource is the engineering department. And fixing a workflow in production environments costs 10 times more than it's going to fix costing during the design phase of the project. It's incredibly important to get as close to the correct user experience as you can within the first build out, that MVP experience I was talking about earlier. And that mitigates revamping a poor user experience down the road. So look at what your org is spending in development points and tickets to fix UX issues on your platform. That is a way you can measure the cost of bad design. Look, pull up those bug tickets, look at the points on them, see how much time your engineering team is fixing bad user experience, bad flows, bugs in data entry, because that is what it is costing your org to manage a poor user experience in your platform. And you can say, hey, we have spent $500,000 this year fixing these user experience bugs. Why aren't we spending more time on the research and development and design phase of our projects to mitigate this expense long term, right? There's a way that you can frame that for your organization where those dollars and cents are going to make a difference to that executive team. There's lots of other ways to measure success. I'm not going to jump into all these, but I've got this list here. And what I'm going to encourage all of you to do is to do some research, pick a framework, and just start. Find a platform you want to use. Work with an analyst. A lot of you might have Pendo or some other tool or database access. Like, just find a way to start looking and measuring things. Measure where you're at today, and then measure where you want to move to. Find that way to create that success within your org. And last piece here is, it can be really hard to measure things on the design side, right? How do you measure the success of your work when timelines in your process can be extended for months or years? Like, I've personally been in the position where some of the items I've researched and designed took 2 years to make it into production, or where I've been advocating for a process improvement or an accessibility audit and remediation for a long time before I see movement on that. Good things take time. Because of this, I've come up with a few ways to look at success that don't include metrics. So other ways I think about success are that we've advocated for our users in the results of our research, we've solved customer problems, we've ensured the successful delivery of our design system and components in production, we've created an accessible design for our impaired users, and we've developed strong relationships with our partners in product engineering, marketing, sales, and customer success. Like, if you are doing these things, you're going to have success in your company beyond just measuring an outcome. And, this brings me back to this side on my philosophy on design. I really do believe that we've got the ability to impact and add value to everything. And if your company isn't buying into these design thinking and different methodologies I've proposed, like, really show them the impact you can make working with your peers and having success. Think about design thinking, applying your research and philosophy, and how you can use that to improve multiple areas of your company, solve business problems, and create that deep impact. And if you can manage to do this successfully across your organization, you are an enterprise designer. And that wraps up my presentation today. I really appreciate everybody that attended. I'd love it if you had any questions at this point. Please drop them into the chat, and I will do my best to answer. And we'll give everybody just a couple minutes. So Sasha Wang said, how do you convince the stakeholders to onboard with your idea? So I think that's, to answer that question, it's really kind of specific to, which idea that is. So within this presentation, I presented quite a few different potential methodologies that you would use. I would say, like, find the one that's the most important for you and find the research that you need to back up the decision that's going to help you move that thing forward. Like, is it that you don't have that design system at your company, that component library? My advice there is just start. Like, I didn't ask permission to create the initial component library system within our design tool. I just got the design team together and said, we're going to do this. And then I use that to leverage into, here's our design system engineering team. Now we need alignment to create success, to get these tools out faster. There's typically plenty of research out there that's going to help you advocate for, if it's a design system or research methodology, you can find assets online that will help you develop that pitch deck that you want. Getting to that approach to advocate for design that is new or different from the stakeholders' expectations, it's research, right? You have to prove that what you're doing is going to work. And if the leadership isn't listening to the research, you're going to have a hard time. You've got to find that path to advocate for the research and the results, and it's about measuring those outcomes, right? So, I've definitely been there where I've been in disagreement with different stakeholders, and then maybe find that platform where you can A/B test their version versus yours. We've got Usability Hub that we use at Kazoo, and that allows me to quickly crowdsource 100 opinions on a particular design. If you don't have the budget for that, take it to your internal team, put together a Google survey, put your designs in there. There's lots of free tools out there that you can use internally that are going to give you quick numbers on a preference approach, a workflow approach. Conduct undercover research at your org. Go around and set up those interviews with your sales team, your customer success team, get their opinions, document it. You have to come with the proof to get back to that answer that you want to move forward. Next question. Going back to your slide on ways to measure success, what frameworks would you recommend to a newbie to UX research first? What will give the best foundation in your opinion? I would say NPS is typically one of the easiest to get started with. There's lots of ways to do that. I know most customer success teams are typically doing this already. So, getting into, do they have this data already? Can you look at that? I know Pendo has a way to push NPS out. You could also send that once again as a Google survey out to your customers. There's lots of ways to build out NPS. And that's an easy one to do. The other thing I'd really look at is really understanding your engagement data at different levels of your platform. And that's harder for a newbie because you're either going to need a platform to do that, or like Mixpanel or Pendo, or you're going to need a business analyst to help you churn up those numbers if you can't write your own SQL. Has your work at Kazoo exclusively involved creating new design systems from scratch, or have you had clients that already had a design system in place and you had to adapt or overhaul it? How did you navigate that situation, and how did the process differ? So when I came into Kazoo, we were two companies. I interviewed at a company called You Earned It, and I got hired at a company called Kazoo. And that was because we are owned by a private equity company that likes to buy lots of different companies and smash them together to create larger companies. So that recognition and rewards framework, that was one company, and the performance management was another company. So we brought those two companies together, and they each had their own design system. And when I got hired, I got really lucky, and I got written a blank check that said, Chris, bring these two platforms, user experiences together for us. So I got to design that from scratch, but they each had their own design system at that point. They each had their own user needs. And what I looked at was trying to take the best bits of both of them and create something new. We just acquired another company, and they don't use our design system. They're on Google Material Design. So I'm about to do this whole exercise again. Navigating it is hard. People get tied to past workflows, how things work today. They might get hung up on the expense or the cost of managing these changes. And it's really about what's valuable to your organization, right? Is it important that you have a unified design system? It may be, it might not be. It depends on how big your product suite is. Is it important that you have a really combined user experience between those platforms. Maybe not. You have to look at each situation individually and try to uncover, what is going to make that right thing work for your org. I want to align our design systems as much as I can. I'm going to work hard to do that, but I'm going to understand that it's not always going to work or be applicable. Any other questions today? All right. Well, I just wanted to say thank you all so very much for attending. If you want to connect, please find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Please comment on our meetup page. We are recording this presentation. We will post some links to it shortly so everybody can have access to it again. And I, once again, really appreciate all your time here on a Wednesday evening. I hope you all have a great night.